One of the biggest pitfalls in qualitative interviewing comes quite simply when the interviewer does too much talking instead of waiting for the interviewee to give the answer themselves. Oftentimes, the interviewer thinks that they're being helpful, actually, to a tongue-tied participant by providing them with some prompts. But in reality, a good interviewer should be patient, give the interviewee time, and let the answer happen on its own. We're going to show you right now two versions of not giving enough time to a participant. Version number one occurs when the interviewer, hearing a pause in the answer, fills in that space with a suggestion or an answer of their own. Watch that right here.
So Charlotte, how would you describe the teachers at this school?
The teachers at this school, well,
like good? You'd probably say they're pretty good? They're like, for what you would expect?
yeah, they're good.
It seems like Nicole is trying to be helpful and is trying to read Charlotte's face and help her come up with the words. What she actually did in that instance was to cut Charlotte off from thinking herself and unknowingly lead Charlotte into answering the question the way that Charlotte thought Nicole wanted her to answer it. There's a second type of mistake that's commonly made in this scenario that we'll show you. In this next clip, Nicole will not put an answer in Charlotte's mouth. Instead, however, she'll accept a short, stock answer from Charlotte and simply move on to the next question, even though the answer that she received was not very useful or detailed. Watch that here.
Charlotte, so how would you describe the teachers at this school?
The teachers are good. I like the teachers. I think they're really good.
Great, so what about the workload? How would you describe that?
Charlotte's answer about teachers didn't really tell us much. Now, maybe it's because she didn't have that much to say about it, or maybe she really did just feel like the teachers at the school were good. But maybe she was also nervous, or hadn't yet had time to fully verbalize her answer, or even to really consider her answer. But Nicole moved right on to the next question. Now watch what happens when Nicole just sticks with the question, but lets the silence linger for what might initially feel like an awkward amount of time.
So Charlotte, how would you describe the teachers at this school?
The teachers, I would say the teachers are good. I really like them. Okay, well, if you really want to know the story, I like some of them, not all of them. And the ones that are really good are the ones who take time for their students. So they'll stay after class if we have questions. They'll ask about our personal, well, not our personal lives, but they'll ask about our lives outside of just the classroom. So I know that they really care. And not all teachers do that.
When you go into an interview, you will hopefully have some sort of interview protocol as your guide. A list of questions and topics that you follow and use to ask your interviewee. Sometimes you'll be conducting a structured interview, which means that you need to make sure you ask every question on your list in the exact same way, in the exact same order. But more often, for the work you'll be doing with CSBGL, you'll be doing what's called semi-structured interviews. This is when you use your list of interview questions as a guide, but you can skip around, spend more time on some questions than others, and most importantly, occasionally veer off track a little bit if a promising lead or idea comes up. However, interviewers, especially first-time interviewers, often get nervous during their interview and use the interview protocol, the list of questions, as a crutch. So much so that they sometimes neglect to actually listen to the answers that their interviewee is giving. The problem with this is that if the interviewee brings up a fascinating topic or something new and exciting, the interviewer needs to be ready to identify that and then pursue that line of discussion, at least for a little while, with some impromptu questions that they ask on the spot. Watch what happens in this following example. Nicole is trying to find out about pressures that students feel in the classroom that might affect their overall happiness at school. Her interview protocol starts out by asking about the classroom environment, then about teachers, and then finally about the workload.
So how would you describe the intensity in the classroom? What's the level of pressure like in classes?
Well, honestly, I really don't think that there's that much pressure in the classroom. I mean, people here at the school, they talk about how competitive it is, but whenever I go into the classroom, I just feel that the teachers are supportive, the students are supportive. I don't feel that pressure. Now, if you want to talk about the dorms, that's another story. But here in the classroom, there's no pressure.
Great. So how about the teachers? What role do they play in setting the tone in the classroom?
Did you hear anything interesting about Charlotte's answer? Did you hear when she snuck in that very quick line about dorms being another story? That was a marker that seemed to indicate she had something important to say along those lines, something that was meaningful to her and had impacted her on that level. But Nicole missed it because she was concerned with her follow-up question about teachers. Now watch as Nicole keys in on this emergent topic.
So how would you describe the intensity in your classes? What's the pressure like in classes for you?
Well, honestly, I really don't think there's that much pressure in the classroom. I mean, people talk about how competitive it is and how competitive the school is, but when I go into the classroom, everybody's really supportive. The teachers are helpful, my classmates are helpful, so yeah, I don't really see that. Now the dorms, that's another story, but in terms of in the classroom, yeah, it's not competitive.
So you said the dorms are another story. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, I just, in the dorms, it's just, especially in the girl dorms, there's cliques that form and just a lot of stuff that happens that's not very nice, and girls don't make you necessarily feel good about yourself, and different friends will be mean to each other, and so there's a lot of pressure that I feel in the dorms.
Can you give me a specific example of when girls feel pressure in the dorms?
In that example, Nicole follows up on Charlotte's story and might stumble onto a very rich and significant research opportunity, even though that question was not on Nicole's original protocol. What's more, Nicole can always go back to her script and ask Charlotte questions about teachers and curriculum later, after Charlotte has unloaded this very important piece of information. Asking leading questions. This is a really tough one, but a good interviewer realizes there's a power dynamic that always exists between the interviewer and the interviewee. And a good interview always tries to make sure that the way they ask a question is not leading or doesn't compel the interviewer to answer a certain way. Listen to these 3 different ways that Nicole asks the same question about school culture.
So the next couple of questions are going to focus on student relationships. So doesn't it seem like there's a lot of bullying here? I mean, where in the school do you think bullying happens the most?
Well, I guess the lunchroom.
In that example, Charlotte has no wiggle room whatsoever. It's an accepted fact that there is bullying at the school. And what's more, Charlotte feels like she needs to come up with some good examples to meet the expectations of Nicole, the interviewer. Here's a second way of asking that same question.
So the next couple of questions are going to focus on student relationships. What's your opinion on bullying in the school? Like, how much or how little bullying exists here?
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of bullying. I mean, it happens sometimes, but there's not a lot.
That second version was better, as it gave Charlotte the opportunity to answer the question in either a positive or a negative way. But there's still room for improvement, however. Try this third option.
So the next couple of questions are going to focus on student relationships. How would you describe the culture between students at school? Generally, how do kids treat one another?
I'd say generally students are pretty nice to each other. There's a culture of respect at our school. But there are some times, and there's some students who get picked on, and sometimes that's in the locker room or it's after school. But for the most part, students are pretty nice.
What's distinct about that version of the question is it allowed Charlotte maximum flexibility in constructing an answer and in creating the vocabulary that best fits the phenomenon. While the second question was much improved, it still started Charlotte off with the concept in the language of bullying, which is already quite charged and has a lot of cultural implication and meaning already. In the third scenario, Nicole waited for Charlotte to bring up the issue. At that point, Nicole can feel free to engage with further questioning around bullying. Or, even if Charlotte didn't bring it up at first, then Nicole can pursue it, as she's already noted that it didn't come up on the first pass. Oftentimes, an interviewer will be so eager to get some of the ideas and issues out on the table that they will ask questions that have too much crammed into them.
So let's talk about some ideas for the future. What are some ways that the schools could address the gender imbalance in the curriculum that you mentioned, and when would they need to start thinking about implementing these changes?
Well, I think that they should implement the changes at the beginning of the school year, because once the school year gets started, teachers get overwhelmed, they have a lot of things on their plate, and so they don't really have time to be putting in new things. And so if they have time over the summer, maybe in July, to get together and do some professional development and work on this, there would be a lot better for us in terms of getting things done and implemented in the school year, especially in terms of gender equity.
As you can see, it's a great answer, but it only has to do with the second part of the question, when to implement. Charlotte was so involved with that part of the question that she forgot to answer the first part, which was arguably more important. What changes would actually be made? These questions could have easily been split up ahead of time, and Nicole could have asked them one by one, allowing for plenty of time for elaboration on each.